What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today let's get started with Gilbert Burns calling for no takedown fight against Nate Diaz. Gilbert Burns is really excited to get back into the octagon just over a week after losing a decision to surging welterweight Khamzat Chimaev. The Brazilian says he's keen to stay active, not just to continue on his journey for an eventual meeting with the welterweight champion at some point, but also to make the big bucks in big fights. Burns took part in perhaps the most highly anticipated fight for UFC 273 back on April 9th, when he fought Khamzat. The fight is now one of the big contenders for Fight of the Year, despite the judges giving Khamzat a unanimous decision victory. The bout was a war from bell to bell, and those 15 minutes surely saw both men heavily tested in all areas of the fight game. Khamzat now moves on to another potential big-time welterweight matchup, perhaps against Colby Covington. Burns is now sounding the alarm on what he wants before the promotion is able to really move forward with him. In a recent interview, he mentioned that he'd love to fight either of the Diaz brothers or Jorge Masvidal, all of whom are big names in the sport and could bring Burns a big payday. Now, in a recent interview with TMZ Sports, Burns gives more details on a particular matchup he's really looking at, and a special stipulation that could be great for the fans. This is what Burns had to say.
But now I want a big fight. I know Nate Diaz needed an opponent. I think that would be a crazy fight. I can put in a contract, no takedowns attempted, just strike, just stand up.
While it is unlikely that the UFC would add in a special stipulation like that, Burns is not shy about telling the world what he wants. But what do you think? Would you want to see a stand-up fight between Burns and Nate Diaz? And also, who do you think would be a good opponent for Burns next if Nate says no? Joshua Fabia claims Paulo Costa was sabotaged by the UFC ahead of Israel Adesanya title fight. Everyone's favorite guru, Joshua Fabia, is back in the news, and he's making some bold claims about the UFC and Paulo Costa. During a recent interview with Talkin' MMA, Fabia, as he does, didn't hold back on his theories and comments concerning a range of MMA fighters and the fight business as a whole. Diego Sanchez's former coach has drawn the ire of the MMA world for his antics, coming up to retired fighters about perceived slights, calling out the broadcasting teams for the way they call fights, and just generally strange behavior and comments throughout his time in the limelight. Now, he's giving his side of what he feels happened to Paulo Costa before UFC 253, when he took on middleweight champion Israel Adesanya on Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. Fabia was with Sanchez, who was fighting on the same card, and Fabia was in the same hotel as Costa. The Brazilian lost his fight to Adesanya in spectacular fashion and was TKO'd. There was a lot of animosity going into that fight, but after the bout, Costa admitted he drank a lot of wine the night before the biggest fight of his life. In the interview, Fabia claims that the reason why Costa had to drink to go to sleep was because of the fact the UFC put Costa and other Brazilians who were on the same card, they were put on the side of the hotel that has a Formula 1 track and was incredibly noisy from 10 p.m. to about 3 a.m., which prevented them from going to sleep. This is what Fabia stated in the interview about that.
So you got this hotel that's shaped like a C, or a quarter of a C. Mm-hmm. And what happened was there's a bunch of fighters on the inside of the C, which is on the side of the track, where the track is just blasting into you. Well, that was the side that Diego and I were on. That's the side that all the Brazilians were on. The Brazilians were underneath us.
Fabia goes on to talk about how the UFC wanted Adesanya to win and how they used this to make sure he had the edge in the title fight. Since that fight, Costa has lost to Marvin Vettori in a catchweight bout. Meanwhile, Adesanya is looking to defend his title again later this year against #1 contender Jared Cannonier. What do you make of Fabia's comments regarding Paulo Costa, the hotel, and the UFC wanting Izzy to win? After big win over Vicente Luque, Belal Muhammad talks Khamzat Chimaev, Colby Covington. Belal Muhammad did what he needed to do to get the W on Saturday night against Vicente Luque at UFC Vegas 51. The Chicago native threw in some takedowns and showed his improved striking skills to get past the tough Brazilian and make his case for a potential welterweight title shot in the future. After the fight, Belal called out Colby Covington, bypassing the champion, and stated that it's been years since Colby has fought anyone who is on a winning streak outside of the champion. He also mentioned how Colby calls out fighters who are smaller than him, and Dustin Poirier comes to mind here. Then, in the post-fight press conference, Belal doubled down on his words, and he says he wants to stay active and fight guys who are above him in the rankings. This is what he stated during the press conference.
So, like I said, the two best guys that are above me that are winning right now are Khamzat and Colby, and neither one of them have fights.
Belal went on to say that he'd also be up for fighting Leon Edwards in a rematch of their fight night meeting back in early 2021, a fight that ended in a no contest on account of multiple eye pokes that Edwards committed to Belal, who had to head to the hospital after the bout to get it looked at. Still, Belal Muhammad has gone 8 fights unbeaten with 7 victories and is likely going to be in the top 5 in the welterweight division once the new rankings come out this week. But what do you think? Do you want to see Belal Muhammad take on either Colby or Khamzat? UFC President Dana White is dismissing calls from Henry Cejudo as Triple C continues to call out big-time fighters while on the sidelines. In a recent interview with TMZ Sports, he was asked whether there's a real possibility they would match up Conor McGregor with Henry Cejudo upon the Irishman's return. Cejudo has been calling out active fighters since his retirement in 2020, and lately he's been calling out Conor McGregor. Dana White poured cold water on that idea when he stated that talking crap on Instagram doesn't get you fights, and that Cejudo is retired, and that Cejudo knows what to do if he wants to come out of retirement. What do you make of what Dana White stated here?
I knew you were retired. I knew you were gonna say that. So Cejudo ain't fighting. He's not fighting.
Cejudo's retired, you know? Cejudo knows what he needs to do to get back in and get whatever. I mean, just talking shit on Instagram does not get you fights.
Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on the latest fight news. UFC is looking to make Jon Jones vs. Stipe Miocic a reality. Could it be? Could we finally see Jon Jones fight in the heavyweight division after more than 2 years off? UFC President Dana White admitted in a recent interview that he is hopeful that this fight could finally take place and that they're working on making this fight happen. The heavyweight division is in a bit of a holding pattern on account of UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou being out for perhaps the rest of the year due to a knee injury and his recovery from serious surgery. He also has a looming contract dispute with the promotion that could extend his absence even further. Fans have been eyeing up the possibility of Jones fighting Ngannou ever since Bones vacated his light heavyweight title back in 2020 to move up to fight the big boys. But Jones has been at odds with the UFC over compensation to do so, and with Ngannou now out of the picture for the foreseeable future, many have speculated that the UFC could crown an interim champion. The speculation has been that Jones could fight former heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic for the interim title. Now, the UFC has not announced any interim title for the heavyweight division, nor have they confirmed any matchups involving Jones or Stipe. For now. But in an interview with TMZ, Dana White admitted that this is what he wants to take place, sans the interim title. This is what he said in the interview.
And I was just telling somebody the other day, our lineup for this summer is incredible. So I'm hoping that Jon Jones is going to be a part of that lineup this summer. Stipe makes sense.
Jon Jones has not fought since he won a decision over Dominic Reyes at UFC 247 in February 2020. Stipe hasn't fought since he was knocked out by Ngannou for the heavyweight title back in March of 2021. But it remains to be seen what happens here. Jones has stated he wants to fight in June or July of this year. Do you think the UFC will actually make this fight a reality? And who's your early favorite to win this heavyweight battle between Jones and Stipe? The UFC has promoted a flyweight battle to the main card of this Saturday's UFC Vegas 52 event. Sumadarji will take on Manel Kape. Both fighters are coming off of back-to-back wins in the flyweight division. Who do you think is going to win this fight, Sumadarji or Manel Kape? Kamaru Usman tells Khamzat Chimaev not to get caught up in the hype. Khamzat Chimaev has been getting a ton of praise for not just the way he fights, but the fact that he's still undefeated and that he's finished 95% of his fights. The only man he couldn't put away was Gilbert Burns, the number 2 ranked welterweight at the time when they met at UFC 273 and the former title challenger. Burns is clearly one of the best welterweights in the world, and Khamzat showed that he absolutely belongs with the best of the best in the division. The Chechen Swede has also been linked to a possible title fight against champion Kamaru Usman. The Nigerian Nightmare has also been incredibly dominant during his time in the UFC, and like Khamzat, he too has yet to taste defeat in the octagon. Usman was watching the UFC 273 welterweight clash with a keen eye, knowing that the UFC might want to capitalize on Khamzat's hype and pair him up against the champion sooner than later. While UFC President Dana White stated that Khamzat's next opponent is most likely Colby Covington, Usman is still taking notice. One thing he does see with Khamzat is his mentality and believing his own hype. This is what he said in a recent interview when it comes to that.
I think him, if I had a word of advice for him, is just to not get caught up in that, because it kind of seemed like that is starting to happen.
The fact remains, Usman is still nursing a broken hand injury, and some fighters have let it be known that Usman's injury is more severe than people think. He's set to take on Leon Edwards later this year for the belt, but there's been no word on when this fight could get scheduled. But what do you make of Usman's comments here? Do you feel Khamzat is taking the hype too seriously, to his detriment? Do you disagree? Let us know in the comments. Today's video was packed with some juicy stories from the fight world. What are your thoughts about what's going on in MMA? Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to see more videos just like this. See you next time.